All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Elise Eifert. I'm the graduate coordinator for the gerontology program at UNC Greensboro. I'm sharing co-hosting duties with Dr. Chantel Caro, an assistant professor in gerontology. Chantel, if you want to wave to everybody. On behalf of all of us, we want to thank you for joining this special panel discussion featuring alumni from UNCG Gerontology. Our incredible alumni are going to share what their career paths in aging have been like and offer their advice for emerging professionals in aging. We were originally supposed to have 4 panelists, but we've had some sickness in the past 24 hours. And so we're down to 2, but the 2 that we have are incredible. So I am thrilled that they're able to join us tonight. The panel is part of Careers in Aging Month 2025. Careers in Aging Month was created by the Gerontological Society of America to raise awareness about the diverse careers available in the field of aging and to celebrate current employees in the profession. We want to encourage you to be vocal about careers in aging during this time. Careers in Aging Month actually ends in, about 4 days. So you have 4 days left to be vocal about careers in aging. Maybe you can just make note of it for 2026. But I think we all know the demand for professionals with expertise in aging is growing rapidly, and we need as many people as possible to pursue careers in aging. So without further ado, I want to move on to our panel. Dr. Caro and myself have a series of questions for the alumni panel. We're going to take turns asking these questions and allow each of our panelists to respond. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have some time for our guest to ask the panelists any specific questions that they might have. So to get us started, I think it's important that we all get to know our panelists. So let's start with introductions. If you don't mind taking turns introducing yourself, tell us who you are and describe your current position.
I can go first. So hello, everyone. I am Kirsten Radcliffe. I am currently a Assistant Executive Director and Hospitality Services Director at Heritage Green Senior Living Community in Greensboro. My dual role was newly to me. So I started as the Hospitality Services Director solely, and then was promoted last year into the Assistant Executive Director role last January.
My name is Heather McGill. I currently am the Elder Justice Specialist Coordinator at the Guilford County Family Justice Center. My role there is I lead and I facilitate our county-wide elder abuse multidisciplinary team, and I also facilitate our elder abuse case reviews that we do. I also do care coordination around elder abuse, and it's broad. It can be anything from fraud and scams, financial exploitation, neglect, to physical abuse and sexual abuse. And so at the Family Justice Center too, we see child abuse, domestic violence, family violence, sexual violence, and stalking and harassment. And back in 2019, they really wanted to expand in the programming area of elder justice. And so dream was dreamed and a grant was written, and then there I was. And so I've been doing that now for about 6 years.
Should I start us with questions? Perfect. All right. So our first question of the evening is if you could share with us your career in aging journey. Did you always want to work in aging? Have you held any other jobs before you got where you're at right now? And if possible, could you share with us maybe what the role of your education in gerontology kind of played in that trajectory?
I'm going to go first, Heather? I can go first. So I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't originally plan to be working in aging. In my undergrad, I completed my undergrad in exercise science and actually wanted to be a physical therapist. While I was doing my physical therapist hours my senior year of college, I actually did it at Pennyburn. So I got to expose to the elderly population, and that's kind of where I fell in love with this may not be the role I want to do it in, but these are the people that I want to work with. So after I graduated with my undergrad, I found this program, which kind of led me a little bit more in kind of maybe the direction that I wanted to go. Upon graduation, I started as a lead concierge in a senior living community that was being built from the ground up. So I kind of got to see everything from the executive director planning on everything that needs to be prepared for the community opening, as well as the sales director on everything that she had to do to get prepared and to get people into the building. Did that for about 10 months while we were in a off-site sales location. When the building opened, I moved into a sales role. So I was a move-in coordinator. So I supported all of the families coming in as far as what paperwork was needed and really tried to make it a warm welcome for their loved ones coming into the community, because it could be a hard transition. Did that piece for about a year. And then I transitioned into a business office manager. So I kind of went on the flip side of things and did the associate side of things, but also got to stay in touch with the residents as far as accounting pieces, billing pieces, things like that. And that's really where I found that was my niche. So I ended up being a business office specialist, and I traveled and supported about 42 communities with that company all over the East Coast. And then just realized traveling really wasn't for me. So decided to come back home. And that's how I ended up at Heritage Greens. I came in as a resident relations director. So I came in kind of with the background that I was previously exposed to. So I was still doing the move-in paperwork, the welcome home experience, making sure that the families and their loved ones were given that warm welcome when they come in to make them feel that they made the right choice. I got my administrator's license in 2022, kind of just to put that in my back pocket. Wasn't really sure if that was the way I wanted to go, but wanted to make sure that I wasn't leaving myself without any options, that maybe I wanted to do that down the road. So last January ended up interviewing for our assistant executive director position, which I luckily received. So now I serve as a dual role. In my assistant executive director role, I support one department head for about 6 months, kind of deep diving into all the different departments that support the community and how they all work together. But I also support our hospitality services side of things, overseeing the front desk team and working closely with them to make sure that the families and residents have everything that they need. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
I did not, I didn't always know that I wanted to work in aging. I always had a very personal relationship with my grandparents. Like, I was really close with them, and I don't think I ever put my finger on that. It wasn't until as I got older and they started to age that I just like realized how much I just truly appreciated like being around older adults and being around those that are generations apart and all that you share in common with them. I went to undergrad for human services. But when I finished undergrad, I started working for the school system and dabbled in like parent education. And at that time, I remember saying, like, I know I want to go back to school, but I just did not know what it was for. And I would really flip-flop around. I don't know what to do. Then I went in and worked in the private sector and managing homeowners associations down at the coast. And then I landed a job working with the ARC of North Carolina, where I did permanent supportive housing for adults with most of them had to be chronically homeless. So 2 years of homelessness is by HUD's definition, and have a disability, which was usually mental health. And I would actually go into the woods and to homeless encampments, and I would find people who needed housing and help them do wraparound services to get them placed in the housing that the ARC owned. And most of the residents there were older adults that were experiencing homelessness. And I just grew to like love that population. It was wild and super challenging. And sometimes I look back and I'm like, I cannot believe some of the stuff that I was out there doing. But I really liked it. So when I moved back to the Triad here, and I found that I wasn't fulfilled in the role that I was in. I just didn't feel like I was helping people. And so I actually joined the Guilford County Commission on Aging, like just to volunteer to do that. And I wanted to learn more about like, where is our money going in our community and what programs are going on. And so I was at that time like taking my time being a stay-at-home mom. And I spent a year with the Commission on Aging. And that's when the Family Justice Center created the position for the Elder Justice Specialist. And I applied for that. And I truly think it was like my work with the Commission on Aging and the volunteer work that kind of just helped me get my foot in the door there. I also had victim services experience in victim advocacy. So some of that criminal justice background in college, I interned with them in the sheriff's office. And it was just like this perfect blend of aging and victim services. And it wasn't until I started there that I was like, I really want to learn even more about this. And it's like, I just knew when I found the gerontology program, I was like, this is it. Even though it took me a while and I went back way later and it was a lot harder as a mom and an adult to learn how to study again 15 years later, I'm still thankful that I waited until the time that it was right for me.
Thank you for sharing those stories. In my position, I get to hear a lot of background from different students. And I don't think I've ever met anyone that had a straightforward trajectory in aging. You know, nobody is, you know, in high school going, when I grow up, I want to be a gerontologist. It like just doesn't happen. Unfortunately, maybe that will change someday in the future, but I think it's encouraging to hear your stories and where you are now for other people who are probably also on this, you know, non-linear path in aging. So speaking of, you know, careers in aging, are there any careers that you would recommend? What are you seeing in your current position? Do you see any future trends in aging?
You want to start, Kirsten? You want me to?
Go ahead, Heather.
Okay. I get this bird's eye view in my position where I work with so many different disciplines. So I work really closely with law enforcement and prosecutors and mental health, but also all those in the aging field in the community, so internal and external partners. I see a lot of needs around aging in place. We know that there's some people that they don't have the funds, or that's not their need or their want to go into long-term care, but there's just not a lot out there to support aging in place. And I know a lot of that is funding related, but I think there's a lot of creativity, and especially around just entrepreneurship that could happen for those aging in place. I think we need a lot more with expertise in the mental health field and counseling, just in geriatrics and for older adults. I see a lot around fraud and scams where police respond to a home and they take a police report and they say, sorry, your entire life savings is gone. You know, we can't get it back. Have a good day. And it's because that's all that they know to do. And that's all that's really out there. But people need services following that. Like that's something you've worked your whole life for. And I see a lot of mental health decline following frauds and scams. So I think that's a great field of counseling. And then social isolation prevention, just we know that isolation is one of the #1 risk factors for abuse and exploitation. And so anything out there that can fill that gap of social isolation. We know that there is not a lot of research out there in sexual abuse of older adults, and even medically, when you talk to nurses and sane nurses, sexual assault nurse examiners, like they'll tell you that there's not a lot out there on how do we respond when someone says that an older adult has been sexually abused. So I think from education to the medical field, there's a lot. I think there's always the need for more care management and just help with family planning outside of the legal field. People have really complex family dynamics, and just that need of like, how do we navigate every single case is so different. So, there's all these books and all this stuff about how do we be a good mom and dad and when our children are little, but sometimes there's not a lot about how do I help my parents, in this stage of life. And so more around that could be needed as well.
It's gonna be hard to follow Heather on that one, but just to kind of tag off of the family piece, I think that I specifically see a lot of family members, specifically ones putting their loved ones in memory care, or looking for their loved ones in memory care, that they're not really sure how to handle their loved ones, or, they may not want to put them in a community, but it's also becoming way too much for them at home. And how can they bridge that gap? There needs to be more support for the families as well as the residents that are facing, the aging of everything. Because while we know of some resources, there's not a lot out there right now that we can provide to these families, or, there's only so many maybe grief counseling or, group counselings that they can go to, but that might not be the resources that they're looking for. And I think if we can provide these families with kind of more of a guidance, or maybe just resources of people that are going through the same thing and having the same feelings, that could just be more down the road of comfort piece when they do have to, finally take that next step of putting their loved ones into a community environment.
Thank you both so much. Really good kind of ideas and of what things are going on and where are gaps that need to be filled. So the next question we have is, what are some of the key success factors you would say for people pursuing a career in aging? If you could share a tip or something you would say that if you're going into this field, this is definitely what you need in order to be successful.
Network. That would be my top 3 to do, because it will be so hard to be successful in the aging field, no matter which route you go. If you don't network with people, you've got to have those people in your back pocket that you can turn to, or, resources that you can give people on maybe where to go. But it's better to know that person that you're sending them to, so you can kind of give them that comfort factor of, oh, I know Heather over here, she can help you with XYZ. I know her personally. And networking for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the aging community, and I've only experienced it really here in the Triad, but it's a tight-knit community too. And so really getting to know everyone. I think that aging can be challenging. So you have to really enjoy that. Just enjoy the challenge, because again, I know I use the term a lot, but it's just a broad area. And so it's hard to get other people to understand and get passionate about it. It's not a sexy topic. A lot of times people don't want to talk about it, and there's not a lot of resources in that area. And so really just trying to get people on board can be challenging. I think you have to have a lot of patience in this field, and then just understanding all the different complexities that come along with it. I know that I have days that are so draining and I'm so tired. But it's also you have these small wins. And I always say that I hope that, especially when I think about the field of elder abuse, I hope that I started in it, and it's still a very untapped field where we're very behind, and that by the end of my career that I get to see huge changes that have taken place. And then I just think it's ever growing and it's ever changing, and you have to always be willing to adapt because it's constantly changing.
Well, Heather, I think you touched a little bit on my question and the next question to our panelists, which is, what are some of the challenges of pursuing a career in aging?
you want to start? Kirsten, go ahead.
All right. So I think, some of the top challenges are patience, as Heather mentioned, things change day to day, and we may be having, an extremely stressful day, and it may be that, everything's going on at one time, but at the end of the day, we're doing what's best for them, and we're here to be their support system. And I think Heather made a great point of being adaptable, of, we might come in and have a plan, but I know I have plenty of days where I come in and my planner's like, yep, I'm going to do these 5 things today. And it's like, nope, I didn't do any of these things today because I was pulled in 17 other directions. So I think just knowing that going in may look very different. And Heather mentioned earlier that every person is different, every case is different, and just kind of learning how can we support different people in different things, and how can we pull in resources to make sure that, we're providing the best possible answers that we can to them. Because if people are looking at us for like clarification or anything, just feeling confident in that.
I would add that, it can be challenging around, especially if you are working directly with the aging population. I know for me that some of my toughest cases and times are I lose a lot of my clients and elder abuse. And so I have used this for a while, this stat that in 6 years, I have had 1 client live until trial. And so I think that it can be it can make it emotionally hard. But again, I've also, that 1 client that did live till trial, I sat with her and got to see someone convicted and go to jail, actual prison for what they did. And so it kind of recharges you, this is why I'm doing this. I think gerontology is still a newer field compared to many other fields. And so getting other people to respect it as an area of expertise can also be challenging. And then just the collaboration that's needed, because it's not a field where one person in one area can do everything. Gerontology truly does encompass so many different disciplines and lenses. And so we need other disciplines to understand what this is, why we need you, and this is why this is important. It's not just its own little island, and we can't work in isolation.
I think also too, aging as a whole is challenging. Most of the people that we see going through something, it's not something that they expected, or they weren't expecting to be here. That one of my favorite, pictures or whatever is of the people looking in the mirror where they see themselves, 50 years ago or whatever, and just remembering that that's who they are on the inside. And they may not have had this plan of this is where I am now, but it's hard for them to understand, maybe I can't go run marathons like I used to, or I want to, but I can't, and trying to help them, cope with where they are and what can we do now, right now, to support you best.
Thank you both so much. And I'm looking at this next question, and I think you both tapped in to probably a lot of answers that fall in line with this. I've been trying to think about how maybe I could reword it perhaps, but our question is, what advice do you have for emerging professionals in aging? And so my thought here is, given a lot of what both of you have already shared, our students that are coming out of this program or are wrapping up their final semester here, if you were to give them advice, or to give advice to people entering this career from other avenues, is there anything that perhaps we haven't tapped into that you would want to share with them as a professional coming into this field?
Go ahead, Heather.
I was going to say, find an area that you're passionate about to also merge with it, because again, it's not just its own thing. And so I know I've already said it, but I was really passionate about criminal justice, and then just these complex aging cases. And so it's like I found this perfect mesh, and I love doing both of those. And also volunteering your time to gain experience. I and I know I already said this, but I truly believe if I had no idea what the Commission on Aging was, and I was like, I'm just going to start going to this. But if I wouldn't have done that, like I wouldn't have met so many wonderful people that kind of helped guided me in the direction that I ended up. And then my last piece of advice, I think you can be so creative with gerontology, and that the opportunities are truly endless, because I believe it is an untapped area. I think it's such a needed area. And I think that right now, I mean, you hear people talk a little bit about like, oh, the population is, it's growing, it's booming. But I don't think they quite know like how much they'll need people with that, expertise in aging over the next, 10, 20, 30 years. And I just think we have a lot of creativity that you can use in this field.
And I think Heather mentioned it, just a little bit of kind of like volunteering your time or interning. We have a program here. It's actually called our Career Lattice program, where associates get to go through every department, and they're with each department for a month. And the goal of that is maybe someone is in one department, but they find a passion in another one that they didn't really know too much about that. And I think that, translates to the aging. You may not know exactly what types of careers are out there, but the more you can kind of reach out or, branch out, maybe you have an interest in something, but when you start getting into that, you're like, I'm not real sure. But the more you kind of like touch on different things, maybe something else will pique your interest.
So the final question I have for you, and I think, again, you both have touched on this just a little bit, but let's just be explicit here and mention why you think careers in aging are so important right now.
I think the easy answer is the baby boomers are coming, right? So like we've got to prepare for all of the baby boomers getting ready to go through their later stages in life. And if they don't have the support systems that all of us can provide, or if we're not prepared for that, we're going to fail them as a whole. And I think, aging is never going away. We're all aging every second of every day. And, we're going to need support too. So if we can go ahead and build that up while we have that population kind of, going through that, then we kind of know what we're looking at. We can set good goals. We kind of know what works, what doesn't. And then, we're always going to be here. There's always going to be careers in aging. There's always going to be a need for the support for the aging population. So the more we can kind of deep dive in right now, as we're kind of growing and will grow in the next couple of years extremely fast, then that will just open new opportunities for all of us in this field.
I definitely echo the growing population. I think with families just continuing to spread out more and more, that we've really got to make aging, it's a we problem, it's a community problem when things are happening, and it has to be. There's a long time where you took care of your mom, you took care of your grandparents, and now that looks different, and people just really need help in our community. And so like our community needs to say, like, we want to live in a place where we can age safely and with dignity. And it should be like, when we're talking about planning for our community, that should always be on there. It's like when we're thinking big picture, what does this mean all the way, not just talking about the schools right now, but what does it mean too when we get to the very end of life? I also think people are not prepared for aging, and no one wants to think about it. And so people need guidance when they get there. I mean, they need a lot of support sometimes. And so there needs to be places for people to go and get that support.
And I think it's also important for us as professionals to just continue to drive home of, getting ahead of things. I see a lot of people on a day-to-day basis that are waiting for something to happen, but it's, why are we waiting until something bad happens? Why are we not pre-planning? Even if you're not ready, at least have a plan of, if something does go wrong, I'm going to do, XYZ, or these people are already set in place. I see a lot of people like, oh, well, now that this happened, it's like, well, why did we wait until this happened? Like, I think, emphasizing the more pre-planning that we can do and the more support we can provide is just going to help you in the long run.
Well said. I just had a couple of recruitment fairs this week, and the statistic or demographic fact that I caught people's attention with, and the one that I like to share, is that there will be more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 18 by 2034. And when I'm talking to people, people want to be like, oh, I want to work with kids. I want to work with children. And I'm like, there aren't going to be children. There's not that many children in the future, but there's going to be a lot of older adults. So it's really eye-opening to them when they think about that this is, the first time in the history of the world that we're going to have numbers like that. And it's a lot of what you all were saying about community preparation. We need to do a better job because it is a we problem. And I also like to frame it as, we want to create the world that we want to age in. If we're lucky, we're all going to be older one day. And, I'm not trying to solve problems necessarily for, today and for the older people right now, but maybe I want to create and solve problems that I know will impact me when I'm 75 and 85, 95, maybe. So just to think about it like that, I think is really, really significant. Thank you so much, panelists. You guys were incredible at answering the questions. You did such a great, thorough job. I want to open it up to our audience right now. If anybody at home would like to ask our panelists a question, please feel free to unmute or raise your hand. You could even put it in the chat and I'd be happy to ask the question as well. So we have got plenty of time. Please go ahead and ask your questions.
I just wanted to comment on what Kristen said about preparing for the baby boom, because I used to teach a class that was called that back when the baby boom was first aging it, and creating a strain on services. But I have to admit that just this morning I read a student paper and he phrased the demographics in a slightly different way than I've been thinking about them in my head. And instead of saying, the percentage like Elise did will be higher of older adults than young people, he said in 5 years, all of the baby boomers will be over 65. I about fell out of my desk chair because, of course, I knew that, right? I know the dates of the baby boom, and I'm a baby boomer myself, right in the middle, and I know what's happening. But it did kind of take me aback that we're in the midst of the thing that everyone was worried about, and it's just, as Elise said, going to create more and more demand for jobs now. And it very much reminds me of what happened when baby boomers were young and we needed to create all these new schools, elementary schools. I mean, I had to go to school in a trailer because they didn't have enough schools. And we're kind of in the same situation now with long-term care. Not so much in this country, but in many places. There are waits for long-term care in some countries that are horrible. So anyhow, Kristen, what you said, it just, thinking about the fact I was worried about the baby boom getting old when I was 30, and I just find it in some ways a good thing that people are still worrying about it, but kind of sad that it was, as you've all, pointed out, it's kind of a struggle to get people to think of it as an issue. And here we are still talking about the same exact thing we were talking about at the beginning of my career. Now that I'm only going to be around teaching for another year and a half or so. So it's just kind of, I don't know, it's good news and bad news, I guess. But I really enjoyed this, and I thought you both did an amazing job.
Thank you, Dr. Adams.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I have one. I was just talking with a student today. Thank you both. Should start with thank you both. I was talking to a student today who actually came to chat with me because as part of one of their course assignments. They needed to go around and ask questions about different careers and disciplines around human services. And one of the things I was sharing with them was, you know, one of the challenges I think I come across, in particular with undergraduate students, is, you know, it's hard, sometimes a hard sell to say, look at all this value, and even if I can get them interested in gerontology and interested in the value of working about and thinking about the lives of older adults, is when they go on the job market, they're not going to see gerontologist on their job ad, right? They're not going to be looking up gerontologist preferred or gerontologist required. And so it kind of speaks to what you were saying earlier, Kristen, where Heather, trying to pair that with another interest, right? Pair that with something that you're also interested in to find that value add. But I wonder if you have any thoughts on gerontology and gerontologists recognized in industry and in aging services as a value add in thinking about careers and jobs. I wonder if you have any thoughts or if you've given that any thought in thinking about how you got to where you all are today.
Truthfully, I haven't really given that a thought, but that is it's a good thought. And I think that would be helpful if somebody is specifically looking, you know, if we're looking for a specific job, obviously in like a restaurant or something like that, we know we can search restaurant. And I don't know if that's so prominent with, you know, aging careers, that I think that would be very helpful going forward. And it's something to think about, even if we're posting jobs now, of something to just think about of maybe that might hit a different population as well.
I would add, I think that we need some of the other disciplines that need us to be the ones to recognize that. I think about it in the land of law enforcement, and like, I know for a fact, I mean, I love working with them, and there's so many times they make my job easier and provide me with so much support, but we also make their job so much easier. You know, when they have someone to say, like, I responded to a home and I have no idea what to do with this aging issue. And they have someone in the community that they can pick up the phone and call and say, can you please help guide me? Or I'm leaving this home and I don't feel good about it. Can you please help this family get to the right resources? Like, I think that's so meaningful for other disciplines to not walk away and feel like I have nothing to give. So I think that we need other disciplines to really recognize that. And Dr. E, when you were just talking about the career fair and people being really not interested in working with older adults and they are more interested in working with children or just other things, I always remind people, and maybe it's because I work with a lot of vulnerable adults, a lot of adults that can't speak for themselves or they've gotten to a place in their life where they can't, but I'm like, well, that was somebody's baby. Like, these are all, everyone that's aging is somebody's baby. And like, I think about, for me, like when, you know, like I'm gone and my son is an 85-year-old man, like I hope somebody's still going to take care of my baby, you know? And so like, I like to try to phrase it like that. Like, I really hope that people are going to be around and care. And the same thing when I often visit a facility, my son does field trips there. When I walk past their rooms, like, to me, I don't see where the kids are like, they're scared walking past, you know, the nursing home rooms, they're hiding their eyes and doing all this stuff. And when I walk past like every single room, I see them like memories, weddings and birthdays and years of like wonderful things. And so I think it is just kind of changing that narrative of just like, there are so many still like glimmers of hope and, you know, later life, and just kind of getting people to that point of like, this is a great area to work in, and it doesn't all end, you know, when you hit a certain age.
I just wanted to comment at something that kind of bridges Chantel's question and something Kristen said earlier, the whole notion of networking, because like on our gerontology Facebook page has a lot of our alums on there going way back to the beginning of gerontology at UNCG, which, you know, the first formal program was in 83, well, 84. So many of the people who've completed gerontology programs of one kind or another at UNCG are now, you know, highly successful in aging services and are in important positions. And so that Facebook page and the other social media stuff we do in gerontology is a very good place to network, which I totally agree with you. But it's also a place that our alumni network is also a group of people who value gerontology and who've studied it themselves. And there used to be a big movement that we participated in one time at UNCG to get everyone who has a background in gerontology to always include gerontology as a credential in job advertisements. And it seems to me that that's worth reinvigorating, because I've noticed that that has fallen out of practice. So anyhow, just kind of a connection there.
Thank you. Heather, I might start using "That's Somebody's Baby" and some marketing and recruitment stuff, because I think that's a good attitude and a good way to frame things. It's very true. Okay, everyone. I'm going to wrap up things. That'll conclude tonight's panel discussion. Thank you to our wonderful panelists, Kirsten and Heather. We appreciate you being here tonight and sharing your experiences with us. I've got to say personally, I'm awfully proud of you and the work that you're doing. I found myself tearing up a little bit just listening to you guys. Like, you guys are really just doing the gerontology program. You're such a great reflection of the gerontology program. So Dr. Caro and myself, we want to thank everyone in the attendance for their time and attention this evening. Please go out and tell everyone about careers in aging. I hope you all have just a wonderful evening. And thank you again to our panelists.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.